I think it's across the entire board.
Has that come up at any of your town halls?
Actually, it has.
It has?
Yes, and it's also come up in the meetings
The
that I've
people
had
of
with
Wyoming
people.
were demanding that you rename the Gulf of Mexico?
So you use the word demand.
Oh,
Very
asking.
few people come to me and
Imploring.
demand anything.
Well, I guess
What people say is that they want us to implement the agenda that Donald Trump
that
ran on.
includes
And this
renaming
is
the
one
Gulf
of
of
them,
Mexico?
Because it has to do with pride in America and what America stands
Representative,
for.
I would just simply say,
Well, you can argue with me as much as
it's not
you'd
about an
like
argument.
to.
I would love to attend one of the.
I would welcome you to attend one of my town halls.
I am asking you an honest question, and you're welcome to answer it any way you'd like. You're telling me and this committee that at one of your town halls,
I have said at my town halls
let me
and
finish
meetings.
my question.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Congress Lens. I'm Audrey. The clip you just watched shows a pretty intense exchange between Joe Neguse and Harriet Hageman during a committee hearing. Moments like this show how quickly political discussions can heat up when lawmakers have completely different perspectives. After watching the full exchange, one thing really stood out to me. Harriet Hageman was explaining what people in Wyoming are actually bringing up during town halls, while Joe Neguse seemed determined to challenge whether those concerns were even real. Now, whether you agree with the idea of renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America or not, the bigger question here is pretty simple. Can an elected official report what constituents are saying without being told that those conversations could not possibly be happening? That is the part of this exchange that caught my attention the most. Before we get into the full breakdown, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Congress Lens, and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into the biggest political clashes happening in Washington.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your courtesy, and thank you, Ms. Hageman and Ms. Hoyle, for being here and for your testimony. I appreciate you all coming before the Rules Committee. Ms. Hageman, I thought I want to perhaps spend a bit of time unpacking some of the conversation you just had with Mr. Norman. We both represent Western states, Rocky Mountain West, of course, from congressional neighbors, if you will. I represent northwestern Colorado, as you know, a long border with Wyoming. And I understand that you held a town hall pretty recently in Wyoming. I don't know if
10 of them.
What was that?
10.
10 of them.
Town halls.
So I am curious, so you've held a lot of them, way more than a lot of your colleagues on that side of the aisle, I will say. So I appreciate that. I've held 10 as well in my district. But I'm wondering, what are you hearing at those town halls? What do folks, just give us a sense of the flavor of what folks are concerned about in the state of Wyoming.
They're concerned about energy production, making sure that we get back to energy independence, which is part of the reason why I think it's so important to rename this to Gulf of America in light of the amount of production. It accounts for about 15% of our oil and gas production in the country. So that's one of the big issues that you hear wherever you go, whether you're in town halls or meetings, is the importance of protecting our energy industry. I hear a lot about ensuring that we are implementing the agenda and the policies that Donald Trump ran on.
Okay.
This being one of them. I think people are,
so wait,
again,
can I just ask you a question on that? Let me just make sure, because I understood the first part. You said energy dominance, protecting the energy industry is something you hear from folks that you represent in Wyoming, and I appreciate that. And then you said implementing President Trump's policies. So you're saying that there are people at your town halls who are demanding that you rename the Gulf of Mexico?
I think it's across the entire board.
Has that come up at any of your town halls?
Actually, it has.
It has?
Yes, and it's also come up in the meetings
that I've had with people.
The
people of Wyoming were demanding that you rename the Gulf of Mexico?
So you use the word demand.
Oh, asking.
Very few people come to me and demand anything.
Well, what
people say is that they want us to implement the agenda that Donald Trump ran on.
And that includes renaming the Gulf of Mexico?
Because it has to do with pride in America and what America stands
Representative,
for.
I would just simply say,
well, you can argue with me as much as you'd like to.
It's not about an argument. I would love to attend one of the.
I would welcome you to attend one of my town halls.
I am asking you an honest question, and you're welcome to answer it any way you'd like. You're telling me and this committee that at one of your town halls.
I have said at my town halls and meetings.
Let me finish my question.
At town halls and my meetings.
You'll have an opportunity to answer. Let me
Okay.
finish my question. You've held 10 town halls across Wyoming.
Yes.
And at those town halls, Wyoming residents, constituents have said to you, I would like you to rename the Gulf of Mexico. Has that happened?
Yes. At the meetings that I have held, as I have said to you repeatedly now, I not only am holding town halls, I'm holding meetings with my constituents.
Sure.
The entire agenda that President Trump ran on, they've talked to me about no taxes on tips.
That's not, I'm not asking you about no taxes on tips.
They have talked to me about renaming the Gulf of America. They have talked to me about the oil and gas development that we have down there. They have talked about exporting energy out of the Gulf of America.
I'll reclaim my time because I think it's a shame.
And I would.
So you're calling me, I think what you're saying is you don't believe what I'm saying.
I'm saying that I would love to come to a town hall, and so I'll certainly look forward to, what we may do is, we may just consider doing a town hall in Wyoming myself so that I can get a better sense from Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated people of Wyoming as to what their priorities are. My sense is, I'm not disagreeing with you that there are many folks in Wyoming who believe that the Congress ought to be pursuing policies that President Trump supports. What I am suggesting is that I find it a little bit unbelievable that of all the issues that the American people are dealing with, that my constituents are dealing with, that your constituents are dealing with, that at these town halls, renaming the Gulf of Mexico was a top priority. I suspect that the people of your state...
One of the things that you're ignoring...
I'm not done talking. You'll have an opportunity to respond. I don't believe that the people in your state, nor the people in mine, would identify renaming the Gulf of Mexico as their top priority. And I find it absurd that we have to engage in this discussion to act as though this is anything but abnormal, that this is sort of just regular order, that yes, in the first 4 months of the 119th Congress, the Republican majority has decided that this is so important that we ought to take floor time to rename the Gulf of Mexico, notwithstanding all of the other policies that I suspect many of your supporters, many of the citizens that you represent are passionate about. I find that hard to believe. And apparently I'm the only one, or at least you and I disagree about this, but I suspect my colleagues maybe on this side of the aisle concur in that assessment. But in any event, I am happy to give you an opportunity to respond.
So one of the things, Mr. Neguse, that you are ignoring is the fact that the state of Wyoming and my constituents in Wyoming have a very close connection to the Gulf of America because we are one of the largest energy producers in the nation. We are the largest coal producer. We're the eighth largest oil and gas producer. Our resources, our oil and gas and coal are actually exported out of the Gulf of America. So it is something that is at the forefront of the minds of the people in the state of Wyoming. I also want to point out one thing.
What does this bill do to help them?
I want to point out one other thing that you did, which is a very clever trick, which is that you asked me if I'd been asked any questions, and I told you that I had. And when you did your soliloquy there at the end, you accused me of being dishonest and disingenuous by then converting that to being the top priority. I didn't say that it was the top priority, but I did say that I was asked questions, and there has been discussions.
So let's have this semantics debate then.
Not only in the meetings that I've held, but when I have met with people who actually have a direct connection to the Gulf of America. So I think what you're trying to imply is that Wyoming has no interest in the Gulf of America, when in fact the state of Wyoming, with our energy resources,
Ms. Hageman, have you testified in front of this? I've been generous with my time.
America.
Have you testified in front of this committee yet this year? Is this your first time testifying in front of this committee?
Probably this year, but not last year. No,
I'm asking you this year. I'm saying in the last 4 months, since the 119th Congress has started, this is your first time testifying, right?
I think so.
You're chairwoman of the Water, Fisheries, and Wildlife Subcommittee, are you not?
Yes.
And this is the first bill that you have decided to present to this committee on behalf of the state that you serve. So this notion, I'm saying to you, whether you or the Republican majority have picked this as a priority is besides the point. Clearly, this is what you all have decided to spend your time on in the opening months of the 119th Congress. Maybe that's what the people of, I guess, is what you're testifying to today, is that the people of Wyoming expect that from you and they support that. I can certainly tell you that in Colorado, of all of the issues that are important to the residents of my state, Gulf of America renaming does not crack the top 3, the top 10 of issues that my constituents care about. You clearly feel differently. That's your prerogative. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, for his time questioning.
All right, now that we have watched the full video, let's talk about what really happened here. First off, I think Harriet Hageman handled this exchange pretty well. When Joe Neguse started asking Hageman about the conversations happening at Wyoming town halls, the question sounded straightforward at first. But as the exchange continued, it became clear that Neguse was pushing a specific point. Neguse repeatedly suggested that it was hard to believe Wyoming residents would bring up renaming the Gulf. But here is something important. Hageman never said it was the number one issue. What Hageman said was that it had come up in conversations and meetings. That is a big difference. At town halls, people talk about many things. Some questions focus on major policy issues like energy production or taxes. Others focus on symbolic ideas or political priorities tied to national identity. Lawmakers hear all kinds of topics when they meet with constituents. Hageman explained that people in Wyoming have talked about implementing the agenda connected to Donald Trump, which includes ideas like renaming the Gulf. But Neguse kept framing the answer as if Hageman had claimed it was a top priority for everyone in Wyoming. That is not what Hageman said. And to Hageman's credit, Hageman pushed back on that point. Another important detail that Hageman brought up was Wyoming's connection to the energy industry. Wyoming is one of the largest energy-producing states in the country. Oil, gas, and coal from Wyoming move through supply chains that connect to the Gulf region. So when Wyoming residents talk about energy exports, national energy independence, or energy policy, the Gulf region naturally becomes part of that discussion. That context matters. During the exchange, Hageman stayed calm and focused on explaining the point. Instead of getting pulled into the tone of the questioning, Hageman clarified the difference between being asked about something and claiming it is the most important issue. Hageman basically explained that constituents brought it up. That does not mean it is the only thing they care about. That is a reasonable explanation. Joe Neguse also made a broader argument during the hearing. Neguse suggested Congress should not spend time on symbolic issues when there are larger problems facing Americans. That is a political position, and Neguse has every right to make that argument. But it is also true that Congress regularly debates symbolic issues. Naming federal buildings, recognizing historic events, and other symbolic decisions happen all the time in Washington. So the real disagreement here is not whether these discussions exist. The real disagreement is whether the issue deserves attention in Congress. And that is simply a political debate. In my opinion, Harriet Hageman did exactly what an elected representative is supposed to do in that moment. Hageman explained what people in Wyoming have been talking about and defended the connection between those conversations and the policies being discussed in Washington. People might agree with Joe Neguse's priorities. Others might agree with Harriet Hageman's perspective. But questioning whether someone is telling the truth about what their constituents are saying just because it sounds surprising is a stretch. This exchange shows how quickly congressional hearings can turn into arguments about narrative instead of discussions about the actual issue. And that is exactly why moments like this are worth watching closely. Sometimes the most revealing part of these hearings is not the policy itself. It is how lawmakers respond when their credibility is challenged. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you like the video, subscribe to Congress Lens, and share this video with someone who follows congressional politics. And let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think Harriet Hageman handled the exchange well, or do you think Joe Neguse raised a fair point? Thanks for watching Congress Lens. I'm Audrey, and I will see you in the next video.